As my people can see, I am back here. As you all can see, the New York skyline kind of behind me. Hey, hey, hey. Yeah, we had to come in. A couple of things are going on. Okay. Trying to do a couple of things. Okay. Let me bring this down. Okay, hey everybody. Hi, hey everybody. How you doing today? Samantha, Andre, Linda, please share, like, and share the show. I got a special guest. I'm real excited to have him today. Uh, Darius, I've got Jonathan Jackson, who's running for Congress in the first congressional district of Illinois. For the record, I have reached out to several people who are running since this process began. More and more people have announced. I plan to reach out to everybody because I want everyone to know that they have a home on this show. Jonathan Jackson, for those of you who do not know, is my brother, and of course, I endorse him fully. But one thing I do know about this particular race is this field. There are great people in the field. I mean, it's a really, really great field. So no matter what happens, we will be well served by whomever the people choose. And so, and that is, and I'm always going to try to be fair. Whatever my preferences are, and we all have them. But they're good people. I know the people who run. I know the people who are running the campaigns. Deputy Governor Luana Peters is involved with Jackie Collins, Kitty Kurth, and Kevin Lampy. Pat Dowell and my brother really helped to launch Pat Dowell's political career. Not that she was not qualified, but everyone needs a lift. So we're all friends. We're all friends, and so I just hope that that we will be able to have some great discussions on this show with all the candidates to see what they can all bring back to the first congressional district and by extension Chicago and Illinois. I think that's really, really important. So so there we have it. How about that? Okay. So let me get this. Darius Brooks, Pastor Brooks.
Okay, we have a minute.
Okay, thank you. And of course, we will be talking with Dr. Max Wolf today about unemployment. It's a big, 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 big deal that no one's really talking about, particularly as they're ending unemployment benefits. And we will be talking about infection prevention, Pastor Brooks, with Dr. Shanina Knighton. And Amir Locke. But you know what? Keep listening out for me, Matt, because we might stay with infection prevention. And I might have you call Attorney Patillo, okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's get right to it, everybody. Woo!
Hey, we've got 10 seconds.
Oh, wow. Wait a minute. Let me put this up on here. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you today on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. That is my official page, everybody. Santita Jackson and Friends. I want you all to become my friend over there, please. I'm getting a lot of friend requests on Santita Jackson. Please go to Santita Jackson and Friends. And please go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Santita Jackson Show, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I want to see you over there. Please like and subscribe over there. And We've got a lot to be talking about today, a lot that we will be talking about today. Special guest is someone who I love very much, who's running for Congress, Jonathan Jackson, in the 1st Congressional District of Illinois. Of course, he is my brother. I have invited the candidates I knew who were running really before he started to run and as he started to run. So I'm putting out formal asks to all of the candidates because I want them all to know that they have a home on the largest progressive talk station in the nation. I want them to know that because I think it's important for us all to know who's running, why they're running, and what they plan to bring back, what they're going to try to bring back, and how we can help them help us. And just so that you know, to fully disclose, there's so many people in the field who I know, who we know, who are dear friends. Indeed, Congressman Bobby Rush is someone my brothers, my sister, and I grew up with. Indeed, when the FBI were after him in the immediate aftermath of Fred Hampton's murder, he surrendered to our parents' home. Jonathan, Jesse, and I were babies then, like 5, 6, 4. We were Jesse, Johnny, and I are stair step kids, and so there's so much love. There's so much love for all, for Pat Dowell and Jackie Collins and Mr. Swain and everybody who's running, and it's a wonderful field. No matter who wins, the 1st Congressional District will win, and that makes me feel really, really, really good. So that's right. That's right, everybody. George Jackson, he is a friend. He's been a friend to our community. Let us not forget that the Black Panthers started the school lunch and the school breakfast program in the United States of America because they saw a need to feed our children, to save our children. So, we're going to be talking with Dr. Max Wolf about the ending of a lot of, or the narrowing of a lot of unemployment benefits, unemployment insurance. What will that mean? And what does it mean for us not to have access to that? It drives people into poverty, bottom line, and infection prevention. During this pandemic, would it not have made a lot of sense for us to have really been educated on how to prevent infection? We never heard about it. You did not know, I certainly did not know, that there was a profession, a carve out called infection prevention. That is what Dr. Shanina Knighton has her PhD in. So how could we not know that? How could we, before we had a vaccine, any therapeutics, before we had any of these shots, before we had anything, how is it that no one told us how not to get COVID, how not to get a cold, how not, how not, how not? We're going to be talking with her about that. And then, if we can squeeze this in, Amir Locke, the police officer who shot and killed Amir Locke, will not be charged. Got a lot to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show today. So I want you to call me at 773 9278, 773 763 9278. Join Samantha and Andre and Linda and Mark out of DC and Carol out of the left coast in Beverly Hills and Dave Dowling up there in Canada. George Jackson, Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia. I love you, Shirley. Lydia Bob from Silicon Valley. Joyce Anderson, George Jackson, Barbara Basin from Oak Park. Matt Soul up there at AM 950 Radio sending you much love. Everybody, please like and share the show. Like and share the show. Like and share the show. Let's get some of these headlines out of the way before we get on with the rest of the show and get some good news from Pastor Darius Brooks. Everybody in Chicago, we will have a high of 45 degrees. Scattered showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 37 degrees. Snow showers. The Dow closed down 144 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed down 315 points. The S&P 500 closed down 43 points. In the NBA, the Celtics were triumphant over the Bulls, 117-94. I think it's called a rout. Well, better luck next time, my Bulls. Spurs will be playing the Timberwolves up in Minnesota, and the Blackhawks will be playing tonight. What is going on today? The big story, Ketanji Brown Jackson is poised to be confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court today. There will be a vote on the Senate floor this afternoon, maybe around 1:45 Eastern Standard Time. We don't know, but be on the lookout. Bipartisan support, she's been able to garner 53 votes. That is what we have at the last count. Senators Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Mitt Romney of Utah are the 3 Republicans who've broken the line and have decided to support Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. She will be the first Black woman to sit on that high court. Polls show that she is the most popular nominee, the most popular Supreme Court nominee in the history of those polls. So I want to know what you're thinking, everybody. How do you feel about being on the verge of history today? Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. We've got a lot of ground to cover. So let me get to you, my pastor, my dear, dear friend, great psalmist indeed. He is from the pastor of the Grace Central Church in Westchester, Illinois. They're doing such great work feeding people during the week. And so we want to know, A, how we can get over to your church and how we can worship with you before you give us good news, Pastor.
Good morning, dear. It's here at Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois, every Sunday from 10:30 till noon, and every Tuesday from 7 till 8. A place where if it ain't in the Word, don't let it be heard. If it ain't in the Word, don't let it be heard. It was around the corner today. I mean, Tuesdays, all around the corner, feeding people, all kind of people in line. People would come with medicine trucks. Santita, it's just crazy, amazing, and we love serving. We love serving. So Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. And I want to give a congratulations to my brother Jonathan Jackson, which is kind of going to be what the topic is going to be today. God knows how to put things together. If you ever want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. He has a perfect plan for all of our lives. I'm telling you the truth, and I'm excited. I know you can tell. Santita, John 15:17 and 19 says, this is the command, love each other. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as it is. You do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. I think if I had to use my thought today, I want to use my thought. Before I can change the world, I have to change my world. Before I can change the world, I have to change my world. If you're going to hope, it must be a hope in Christ. This word is the kind of hope, is a discipline that leads to a strategy that takes you to the promises of God's word, which is what we read and what we trust and what we believe every Sunday, every Bible class, every service we attend that talks about the goodness of the Lord. The topic says that God can change the world. The fact of the matter is you cannot change the world. That's why he said, be in it, but not of it. So we're to create a world, and I'll share how that this world becomes the world you live in. When you're out of the world, which is simply the way the world says and do things, you literally become a citizen in the earth. It switches, which is where the peace of God is. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and they that dwell therein. This word commands means given authoritative order. It's a strategic position from a superior height, one in charge, which is why I say God is not in control, God is in charge. But he gives us the control to make the decisions and choices in our life from the one in charge, so things can turn out the way he wants to. I got to go. But he gives us the control so we can make the decisions in our churches. And see that our world becomes our surrounding. That's why he says, be in the world and not of the world, but we create a world. It's our jobs, it's our families. Jonathan Jackson running, creating a world. When God says the world hates you, he's talking about life outside of what his word says. I got the girl going, so I'm getting happy. Through God's word in our own personal lives, we can right wrongs. That's how we use his word in our personal lives. As I clothe and run on to a close, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and he rains on the just as well as the unjust. What rewards do you have? Do not even match up or balance up to the promises that God has in our lives when we trust him with everything we go. We walk together, we walk better, which is why he says love thy neighbor, because loving someone that treats you like you treat them is easy. So when we're in this world, we got to understand the word of God says be in the world, but not of the world. And we surround ourselves with people of like minds. Jonathan Jackson, congratulations, because he's in the be in the world. I got to get out of there. I got to create my world, change my world.
Amen. And you know what? Who's listening to you today, pumping his fist? Gary Hines from Sounds of Blackness. Change the world. I love it, love it, love it. We love you, Gary Hines, and thank you for your support. Hey, Hannah, down there in South Carolina, how can we get to your church? And since you're doing virtual services and you're also in person, and when can we get something to eat? Because you're seeing trucks from professional people, because a lot of people, professional, unemployed, underemployed, people who are working hard every day, don't have enough to eat, everybody. That's why we're going to be talking with Jonathan Jackson, congressional candidate, and Dr. Max Wolf about what they're doing with these unemployment benefits and all of these enhancements that we saw over the past couple of years that people said were making people not go to work. No, they were actually making people eat. So how can we get to your church, and when should we come when we need to get something to eat, Pastor Darius Brooks?
Tuesday from 5 to 7, we feed all who come.
Tuesday, hold on one moment. Tuesday from 5 to 7. I want to make sure that everyone hears you clearly. Tuesday from 5 to 7 at Grace Central Church in Westchester. And
Wednesdays for seniors. If the seniors can't come out on Tuesday, we do 2 days. Wednesday from 12 till noon. They can come out and we give food, and they're around the corner both days.
Okay.
Great Central Church, 10216 South. Every week. If it's raining, if it's snowing, every week. We're committed to it. We are committed to it. Okay.
Well, that's doing the Lord's work, everybody. And how can we reach you online?
Grace Central Church, GraceCentral.net, info at GraceCentral.net. You can also just Darius Brooks, Google Darius Brooks.
There you go.
Search all that.
Or Grammys. That's what you do. So just Google that and you can find them. So there you go. I love you, Pastor Darius Brooks, and so glad that you are available to God to be used. I think I heard that song somewhere. Did you write it? Yep. As you did so many of the great modern gospel classics. We love you, Pastor Darius Brooks. Well, Dr. Shanita Knighton, infection preventionist, research scholar from Case Western Reserve University and registered nurse. Guess who we have back with us today? Someone who lost electricity, but not her power. Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University School of Medicine, but she is the incoming Dean. We cannot wait to see how God is going to use her in this mighty, mighty way. The incoming Dean for Global Public Health at the NYU School of Global Public Health. Indeed, she and the heads of the university, and they brought her in for the ribbon cutting because this is her school. She's going to be doing so many great things. And because of her, we have Dr. Shanita Knighton. And Dr. Deb, we're going to be talking about infection prevention and the impact that an infection prevention education could have had on us in this pandemic before we got any therapeutics, but also the impact that infection prevention has on us all around the world. I mean, a cold, who wants a cold, right? And who wants all of these infections that can really take us all the way down? After all, pneumonia is an infection. I mean, there's so many things that we have that can be prevented. Dr. Deborah Verholden, welcome back, number one. And infection prevention, why do you think it was so important for us to be talking about this during this pandemic? Because indeed, as we talk with Dr. Knighton about infection prevention, this was your idea.
Yeah, well, I will tell you this. I'm very rarely blown away. Very rarely. And the first time I met Dr. Knighton, I was like, I wonder I'm still alive. I don't know how I'm still alive, how I haven't just gotten everything out here on this planet. And I'm joking her, but really, I just think the way that she sees the world, and the work that she and others like her do is so important. It's so needed. You know, and I think COVID has given us a real opportunity to just do better. You know, but the first thing that people got to do better is to know better. You know, so this idea that there's, you know, a lot that's in your hands that you can do. There's a lot that you can be a demand for also to prevent the spread of infection. I just say everybody needs to know that, and everybody needs to hear that. We often talk, in COVID, and all of my colleagues here talk about the vaccine being the foundation for prevention. I'm like, I don't argue with people about it because I know what they mean when they say that. I know what they're trying to do. But I think Dr. Knighton might say washing your hands is the foundation. Because if your hands are clean, then everything that comes after that, you get what you get. So I just think the work that she does is important because it empowers not just individuals, and that individual empowerment is important. She's also trying to empower institutions and better create better practices in community and clinical settings. There's nothing worse than your loved one going to the hospital for one thing and they catching another thing, and even worse, dying from that other thing. I had the same thing happen with my mom. My mom went to the hospital with a broken leg and caught a staph infection. Got MRSA at the hospital in the whirlpool for a pressure wound from a broken leg. And that MRSA had to be treated with an antibiotic that goes right to her heart, through this IV line called the PIC line that goes right to her heart, developed heart valve problems, and ultimately died of a heart attack from a broken leg. She got an infection in the hospital that ultimately started the chain of events that cost her her life. So it's not trivial. It's not trivial. Preventing infection and the spread of infection in your own life and in community and clinical settings is not trivial. It literally saves lives.
Let me ask you this. How do you, before we get to Dr. Knighton, because we're going to be talking about this in the next segment, because this is so important, because of the things that you've shared with me, Dr. Deborah Furholden, brilliant epidemiologist, incoming dean of the NYU Global School of Public Health, the School of Global Public Health. This is a huge global position that she is going to be assuming. And Dr. Knighton has a huge global position because there's like 7 billion people on earth. There are only like 16,000 of Dr. Knighton's. How do you do this in a city like Flint? Now, Flint's lead in the water problems have become legend, but we have them in Chicago. We have a healthy water problem in the United States, let alone in the world. Let's just look at Flint. When you have to boil your water, and so much of Flint today, just to use it, how do you keep your hands clean, Dr. Knighton?
So that is the challenge. Good morning. So, and thank you so much. I'm always humbled to hear you all talk about me. It's one of those things of where this is where alternatives come in. And so just as you mentioned, somewhere like the Flint, right? When it comes down to boiling the water, you ask yourself, are the guidelines that are even around boiling water to make sure that any kind of bacteria or fungal growth that could be occurring in the water is not happening, right? So that would be one of the things that would be important. Does every household even know how to do that just in itself? Then after they do that, how are they storing their water, right? To make sure that it's staying as clean as possible. Then how are they even heating it back up? What materials are they cleaning it back up, heating it back up in again? We never think about these things. But when it comes down to, like, let's say, I can wash my dishes or something, but can I actually consume it? We don't think about the process of should I even be washing my dishes in it either. So there's so many just points that we would have to go through just to even make it to that point of saying, is the water good enough for me to wash my hands? Then, once that's done, you also ask yourself, okay, well, what are the alternatives? Hand sanitizer do exist, and yes, it is only important that you use hand sanitizer when you have no other mechanism to clean your hands. And then even after about 5 times of use of hand sanitizer, you should be washing your hands because over time it can also build up a film on your hands. So it's not a long-time solution in order for people to clean their hands, but these are the alternatives. And this goes right into what I was talking about before in regards to the information that was provided was privileged information. And that's my argument about it, because anytime you're saying, isolate from others, everybody can't isolate. Just make sure that you're washing your hands X amount of time. school has access to clean water. Oh, like you're socially distanced. How can I socially distance if I'm staying in an apartment and the 2 or 3 families in an apartment, or let's just say it's 8 kids and 2 adults in an apartment? Because that's all that they can afford. So when I say that in this time, our system failed us, and honestly, we should not be surprised by the disproportionate effect, because the guidelines that were not written for everybody, and they were not written in a way for which people could practically see infection prevention in their daily lives.
Well, hold on. Hold that thought, because I want you to talk about that. And I also want Dr. Verholden to weigh in on this, because this is a global problem. It's a local problem. Yeah, we lost 1 million people to COVID. Don't forget that, everybody. But you heard the powerful testimony that she gave us about her mother with MRSA. That happens. I mean, we have so many infection issues in hospitals. At many hospitals, many of our physicians, if we are privileged enough to have a relationship with our primary care physician, they don't want you to go to the doctor. They don't want you to go into the hospital. They're like, you know what? Your risk of getting an infection is high. And that's no slight to hospitals, but there's some things that we need to be doing better. So what, Matt, you said every time you use hand sanitizer, you feel like it leaves residue on your hands. I want to talk with you about that, Dr. Knighton, because I look, you know me, I have isopropyl alcohol in my purse. Yes, I do. And I go wash my hands, because I'm not that into the sanitizer. I'm like, that's not making me feel clean. So we got a lot to talk about, everybody. And Matt, she's going to speak to your question and everybody else's questions. Going to have Jonathan Jackson in the next hour. Congressional candidate Jonathan Jackson. Hope to have all the congressional candidates for the 1st Congressional District of Illinois, so you can find out how you can help them help you. Number one, you need to get registered to vote. You need to participate in these primaries in Chicago, Illinois, and all around the country. But once you elect someone, whether the person you wanted gets into office or not, you must help them help you and push them to get you the products that the federal government has that can help you, like getting clean water so we can wash our hands and get sanitized. On the Santita Jackson Show. Back in a minute. Whew, ladies, how you doing? Yes.
Attorney Patillo will not be on today, then?
No, he will not. So if you recall, thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Matt. Matt's a jewel. Okay. Ladies, how are you today? Pretty good. I love Dr. Knighton's voice. It's so, I feel like I'm in class. Yes, I do. Feel like I'm in class with my teacher. Huh. Oh, I do. And of course, Dr. Deb has got the sexy voice that everybody loves. You know what, everybody? I'm up in New York today. If you notice, I've got a different background. I am in, and wait a minute, Nicole said that I am a hygiene sanitary ninja. Don't you say anything, Dr. Deb, and Dr. Knighton, be quiet. Dr. Deb's going to get on me about wearing 10 masks. I'm down to 2 now. But of course, my decorative mask has a filter in it, everybody, that I change out every day. So boom, how about that? Yes, I do. And all my masks that I put on top of the real mask, they are beaded or sequined. Yes, I love that. Made me feel better once I got that. But anyway, ladies, how are you doing today? I'm up in New York. I went to Clive Davis's birthday party last night. Can you believe he's 90? Oh, girl. Oh. I mean, but you know what? You talk about a life well lived, and he's still making plans, and as well he should. Nothing's over until God says it's over. But, when I looked at him and I saw my father, and my father's struggling to walk, but, he just keeps on pushing, and I admire and respect that. These are when I looked at him, and I looked at when I looked at them and some others. Hold on. Hello. Yes. 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 Oh, hey, I'm on the radio. That's okay, sweetie. Call me. Okay, after 9. Okay. All right, honey. Bye bye. I was like, who's calling me right now? Seriously? Who? I thought about people who live their lives. I mean, just they got every bit of life out of their lives. I saw Miss Flack. We sat at the table with her, Roberta Flack. As many of you know, she's had several strokes, but she's doing very well. She's doing very well, and she was out. We were out until about 12 o'clock last night. So I got to bed, be quiet, at 1:30, and yes, I was up at 4. But I feel energized. Had a great time. Barry Manilow, girl, he did a medley of hits. Um, David Foster and Alicia Keys. But you know I'm in love with Barry Manilow. I have been since I was a child. I love him. I love him. Okay, I know he went on and married and declared himself with his husband, and I'm happy for him. But all this great music that I've gotten from him down through the years has just warmed my heart. Oh, come on, y'all. Hello? Hello? Yeah, that's it. Okay.
30 seconds.
Oh, okay. I'm up here in Dr. Deb City. She's going to be here living large, y'all. Oh, I'm so happy. I don't know what to do. She's going to have a fabulous apartment in New York City. Oh, and I've already invited myself over. I don't care.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. I got me a space on that sofa. Yes. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio. The voice of progressive Minnesota, Gary Hines. Sound of Blackness, we love you. 3-time Grammy Award-winning group. In fact, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis signed to them first. They wanted to make a statement when they established Perspective Records. His newest offering, Juneteenth Celebration, will be out in just a few weeks. So we cannot wait to have him on to talk about that. And we want to go right back to Dr. Deborah Holden, epidemiologist, incoming dean of the New York University School of Global Public Health. We cannot wait to, oh my goodness. Oops. Uh-oh. We cannot wait to hear from her. And Dr. Shanina Knighton. Dr. Shanina Knighton, the infection preventionist. We're talking about infection prevention today. Before we get back to Dr. Knighton, Dr. Verholden, let me switch the question back to you because we want to get back to what Dr. Knighton is saying. What about being in Flint? I mean, you've been an advisor to the governor, to the mayor. Now you are about to become head of one of the most prominent schools of global public health in the world. In the world. What are we going to do about something as simple as sanitizing, cleaning our hands? It sounds simple, but it's not.
Yeah. Well, because you got to think, washing your hands was the thing that they told us to do. Washing your hands, we all know, is that first line of defense. And if you don't trust what you're washing your hands with, we got a problem. This issue around water security, it's just, I really think it's like inhumane. It's beyond unjust. It's unacceptable for us to be dealing with issues of water insecurity in cities like Flint. There are other places, right? When I was in Baltimore, and I remember my chair talking to me about where he lived, and they have well water. And he said, Deborah, well water, if you think the Flint water is bad, well water, blah, blah. And I looked at him, I thought, you choose to live out here. You choose to live in this big countryside house with well water. You got a whole reverse osmosis filter on your house right? He's got the kind of filtration system that you could, put in a village in Africa and make potable water for 5,000 people. He has that just on his own little house, but that's the choice. I'm talking about the municipal water supply of a whole city being poisoned, being disrupted, and in essence, the entire city being poisoned. Imagine not trusting what's coming out of your tap to cook with, to bathe with, to wash your hands with. That is what happened in Flint, and it was and still remains awful. People ask me all the time, how's the water? I say it's better where it's better, and it's not where it's not. There are still parts of the city where people are still facing massive problems with their water. So it's a problem. It's a problem. If your primary defense is wash your hands and you don't trust the water, what can you do? You know what people in Flint have done? They literally wash their hands with bottled water.
That is crazy. I mean, but Matt Sowell, Dr. Knighton, before you go on and and share the importance of infection prevention and why we didn't talk about it during this pandemic. He says every time he uses hand sanitizer, he feels like there's a residue left on his hands, which is why I've been joked, but I've not felt comfortable with hand sanitizer because my hands don't feel clean. They just don't feel clean. What is that residue? And should you just go on and wash your hands? And what about bar soap? What about liquid soap? What about pumping to get the liquid soap? You got me thinking all the time, Dr. Knighton.
These are all valid questions. So starting with the residue from the hand sanitizer, not one hand sanitizer fits all, okay? So there's a chemical inside of the hand sanitizer that's called glycerin. And if people use too much glycerin in the hand sanitizer, it's what builds up that film that feels kind of like slimy, but then it feels like sticky at the same time, like once it flies. So it actually feels like something is going to stick to your hand. And so, yes, it will get the job done in terms of remove germs that are not visible, but it does not mean that it's not going to build up a film on your hands, which is why it's recommended that after 2 or 3, and actually after about 5 uses, let me correct that, that you wash that residue off and you start all over again. So you should be washing your hands in between hand sanitizer use. Now, the other piece of it is what are the conditions for which hand sanitizer is even acceptable? Now, if you got barbecue sauce all over your hand, don't use hand sanitizer because you're just rubbing in the barbecue sauce with the hand sanitizer. So please make note of what I said. We're talking about germs that are non-visible. We're talking about like non-foil hands for which hand sanitizer would be appropriate. Now, when we're talking about hand washing, yes, washing your hands with bar soap at home is safe. Washing your hands, with some sort of, dispensed hand washing solution at home is safe. When you get out in public and you go into a public restaurant and let's say there's a bar of soap that's sitting there, that bar of soap is likely contaminated. And what happens is even though you are putting your hands, like you're washing your hands thinking that, let's say, the antibacterial properties of the soap is going to help you, in essence, you have to remember that, again, not all people buy soap that is necessarily safe or meant to mitigate germs. It could be one of those fragrance soaps. The fragrance hand sanitizers, they actually work less than things that are like industrial that may smell like alcohol because it's containing like just the basic ingredients. And so when you're looking at, let's say, a bar of soap out in public, I would actually be more reluctant to use it. So if it was like where I had no soap and I had no hand sanitizer, or let's say I had soap and I had no hand sanitizer and there was a bar of soap there and the soap looked nasty, I'm telling you right now, I'm scrubbing my hands in a vigorous motion up under water. I'm probably going to give it some extra time at that point. It'll probably be 40, 45 seconds to make sure that I remove germs because friction does naturally move germs, and that water is going to rinse the germs off of your hands. And that's, again, provided that the water is sanitary. But there are ways in which you should be cleaning your hands. But if you know that water, or if you know that the soap is contaminated, then that's where you kind of use the alternative of hand sanitizer. So this is a matter, again, of whether or not one shoe fits all. And I think how I was mentioning before, making sure everybody had access to hand sanitizer, making sure everybody had access to soap, being true. A lot of people confuse antibacterial with antiviral. So people are going out like, oh yeah, I got this good antibacterial, hand sanitizer, and it's like 16 words. It will kill bacteria, but it may not necessarily kill viruses. So it's a good mechanism that you have in place, let's say, when you have it right then and there. So vigorous action, scrubbing, and frequent hand washing, and or using hand sanitizer when that's all that's available is the best way for you to prevent the spread of germs.
People are saying that there is so much to learn. That's what Brew has said. And it's just it's a lot to take in. And let me ask you this. What do you think has been the impact of not having had infection prevention taught during this pandemic? I mean, just during the pandemic. Let me start with you, Dr. Deb, and then go to you, Dr. Knighton. Is Dr. Deb there?
I think one of the issues is,
okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
One of the issues is, like I said, people can do better when they know better. And I think, unfortunately, and I've been saying this the whole pandemic, my big problem is they didn't engage experts. I mean, they just really didn't. And I don't know why it is when it comes to these areas around public health and public hygiene that people think you can just freestyle it. Nobody would ever walk into a hospital and look at the doctor and say, I could do that, and then start, trying to be a doctor. But people surely walk into public health and they act like, oh, I can do that. And they say things and they do things that don't follow any good science, that have no evidence behind them. Our president appointed people to lead charges and tasks that they were not qualified to do. Not that they didn't have some qualifications, but it would be like asking your plumber to deliver your grandbaby. And I think this doesn't make sense. And I think that's the problem. We had non-experts speaking with authority on things that they actually didn't have authority on. And we missed the opportunity to get the messaging right. Not to just the what to say to people, but the how to get the message to them in a way that would be actionable for them and that would actually shape and influence their behavior. And I'm telling you, I know for a fact that helps to fuel the spread of infection.
Doctor,
you have to remember, we got out of that initial surge in the absence of a vaccine. We did not have a vaccine.
You said that.
But we stayed on this never-ending cycle of going up and down because people just didn't really, I don't think people really had what they needed. I think the messaging was mixed. There were people I was talking to them, they washing their hands 30 times a day, and they're at home. I'm like, why are you expecting that? You're doing the most. Washing your hands 30 times a day is going to do nothing but dry your hands out. And if you dry your hands out, you're more likely to get those little cracks in your hands, which your skin is your primary layer of protection. So washing your hands 30 times a day and doing the most is actually going to have the counter effect of potentially making you more susceptible to infection. So not giving people good, solid, actionable information. I know costs us infection, and infection costs us lives.
Dr. Knighton, what about infection prevention? How should it have been taught? What should have been said? What should infection prevention education look like?
So at the beginning of the pandemic, when we did not have any, just as Dr. Dan mentioned, no vaccines, masks were not even a big deal, but they were flying off the shelves. You had people going out thinking that they could get N95s and get access to them. Hand hygiene was talked about for 0.5 seconds. Please make sure that you clean your hands, and that was it. It was not shared that only 36% of people clean their hands correctly. It was not shared how that is your first line of defense. So before you even wear a mask, before just interacting out in the public, before you take, let's say, medications, hand hygiene is an important thing. And many don't realize that in healthcare settings, there are such things called healthcare-associated infections, which is what Dr. Deb was talking about her mom. And the thing is these infections, the best way in order for us to prevent the spread of these infections from patient to patient is to make sure we are cleaning our hands. We're not talking about something as simple like, oh, yeah, I just got wingworm. No, we're talking about the stuff that literally is resistant to antibiotics, is resistant to antifungals, and it's a possibility that these things can spread and they can be outbreaks. But in hospitals, we prevent them from being outbreaks. People come into the hospital with these infections. People get co-infections, meaning that if they coming in for one thing that's infected, and then that infection either transmitted into something else or it grew into something more powerful that was not treated by medication. So I know for sure 100% in my line of nursing, in my line of infection prevention, in my line of having to educate colleagues, create guidelines, and even study the science that hand hygiene works. We were failed in not emphasizing that message enough. It killed me because vaccines made it on the TV. Masks made it on the TV in regards to being important. But you have to actually clean your hands correctly before you can even take a mask, like put on a mask. You need to clean your hands correctly when you're removing it. Then, when you think about a vaccine, the people that had to give you a vaccine had to clean their hands before they even had to give you anything. So there's so many things that we have to do. You shouldn't be eating without cleaning your hands. You shouldn't be touching your face without cleaning your hands. And so there's so many things that we don't think about even in that regard. I talk about our third hand, which is that cell phone. That in itself, I was talking to somebody and they're like, oh my gosh, my skin keeps breaking out, like my face keeps breaking out. And they like, it must be something I'm eating. No, let's talk about the phone and all the germs you put on it every day, and then you put it directly up to your skin. And the irritants that's in it that you'll never see and never be able to understand, but they're there. The fact that people normalize, like, oh man, like my stomach is turning, I must have ate something bad. It couldn't be the fact that you ate that hot dog and you touched your food without cleaning your hands. Even too, I'm going to bring up a situation that many don't even think about. The hot dog stands, right? That we see that sitting out in front of a facility. If it's only one person there and that man don't move all day, this, that, and the other. He got hand sanitizer there. He's dealing with money. He's dealing with hot dogs. Do y'all really think some people cleaning their hands like they're supposed to? Or have y'all ever thought to ask them, before you give me my hot dog and it turn my stomach and make me sick possibly, how are you cleaning your hands and you at the hot dog stand every day for 8 hours and you don't even shut down? I'm just saying, these are things that we don't think about. We don't think about when we go to the breakfast spot and they're putting the cream cheese directly on our bagel, but we don't realize that that plastic container probably fell on the floor and was sitting in the refrigerator somewhere. Or probably was submerged into some other liquid and they had to wash it off because it was the last one. So when I talk about how we were failed, I simply say that there aren't enough public health dollars that are invested into people really understanding what can I do to make sure that I do not have illness. And I'm saying illness in general. That illness that means that you wake up and you're feeling off, but you got to call off of work and you don't understand why. The fact that many of us have walked into jobs and it's like, oh yeah, you know, such and such, she off, it must be something going around because we had 3 people out this week. But yet you got the one that's telling you that everybody else, she's sitting there coughing. I'm just saying, these are things that we have normalized, but we do not have to normalize being ill. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, even during the pandemic, even during now, when we realize that vaccines are doing exactly what I said they would do, and that's, yes, lessen the severity, lessen the death, but I said hands are still going to be the number 1 transmitter. When you are vaccinated, you are jabbed in your arm. That is meant to work on you systemically. That does not automatically eliminate the germs from your hands that you can then transfer to your eyes, mouth, and nose. Or, better yet, transfer those germs to others.
Hold on. C.E. Green from Arizona wants you to slow it down just a little bit because he wants to get more information from you. Okay? because you know you're giving us a lot. I mean, Dr. Deb can attest to this fact. A lot. You're making us think in a whole different way. Your conversation, what you're offering, is a real paradigm shifter for all of us. I mean, Attorney C.K. Hoffler jokes. Well, she doesn't. She's not joking all the time. She says, sometimes I walk away from hearing Dr. Knight and Dr. Deb. I'm like you, and you almost get like a little low grade tension headache because you think about all the things, like I just touched my face, all the things you're doing wrong. But I'm gonna wash my hands. All the things that you are doing that promote infection. It's not things that are not helping you. But just slow it down just a little bit. Okay, CE Green, not CK, CE Green. I want to thank you for tuning in from Arizona this morning. But because Carol Soskin out in LA is going to go get her hot dog at the hot dog stand thing. She said that, but she said yikes. And Matt up in Minneapolis says those hot dog stands are nasty, but they're so good. Yes. Go on, Dr. Knight. And I got about 6 minutes left for you and Dr. Deb.
But I'm cracking up because that whole mindset of it's oh so good. It's like enjoy the hot dog now and then we'll deal with the illness later.
Yes.
And then yes, I mean it's the mindset of many. And I would also say too to CE Green, to go to Hey Dr. Nina, on Instagram and other platforms, or to visit PreventionSavesLives.com. Naturally, we only get so many minutes on a segment each morning, but I can guarantee you one thing, even though it sounds like I'm going fast, is that you're going to think about one to two of those things. And so our brain may only retain 10% of the information that we receive. So even if today the only thing you're thinking about is I need to clean my hands better and I need to be cautious about the hot dog stand, that means that that's a goal well accomplished because you retain those two things. And so I always just remind people of that. And even when I'm presenting, let's say, educational infographics to the community, all of those steps on there in regards to what you should do when you go to a grocery store or when you're riding the subway, you may not necessarily remember all of those steps, but as you continue to build your infection prevention muscle and build it into your daily habits, you then start to pick up on more and more things. And I know that that's the case because even someone, let's say like a Dr. Deb, or, even children that I may talk to, you watch people connect the dots. You watch them connect the dots. And even, for example, her talking about her TSA experience. And she's like, yes, and I handed her my card. And, I told her I wanted to hold my own card up because she had those nasty gloves on. And it was 100 people before me and 100 people after me. So I know that there are germs on my card. So what should I do to claim my card, right? It changes your mind to think about how you can incorporate these things into your life. Just even with us talking about the hand sanitizer and washing your hands with soap and water, it's going to make you ask, if I have the choice of the two, which one will I do that's more appropriate for my situation right then and there? So what we're doing is it's not necessarily going to be building Rome in a day, as we call it, but it's how do you provide information in a manner that's going to say these are the things I should consider. Even still, as we're coming up on Easter, right, which will be, I'm sure, a different conversation. There's still going to be the passing of plates. There's on selection plates or, communal. There's going to be, buffets and dinners and the same things that we talked about for the other holidays. And maybe last time you remembered, we don't need to talk to the food going through the line. But this time you may actually remember, okay, well, we need to actually consider how we're serving the food or when hand hygiene will occur between our members. So these are just things, again, that we just have to consider and realize that over time we build up our muscle for it. So who I am in infection prevention now may not be who I was 10 years ago, because as you continue to learn, it continues to evolve and change, and you tend to learn how to continue to decrease your risk for getting sick. And I like not being sick because there's something magical about being able to wake up in the morning and you can predict how you're going to feel. And everything you planned for that day, you can actually get done because you didn't wake up sick. To me, that's powerful, and that's the one thing that I do practice prevention for, is because it's nothing like having that normal feeling of knowing that you're well.
Well, you know, Carol Soskin is grateful to you. She said, I am thankful to you, Dr. K. I have not been sick in any way for over 2 years. Dr. Deb, I have about a minute, just a little more than a minute left. I need you to wrap this part of this conversation up for us, because indeed we're coming into Resurrection Week. We're coming into Palm Sunday. We're coming into Easter, where we will be living and worshiping communally. I mean, this is a big deal. Infection prevention is a big, big deal. The last minute belongs to you.
Well, I think what we could probably do is give people a good refresher around how to do that as safely as possible. I would remind people, even though our government has tried to convince us the pandemic is over, the pandemic is not over. You are in New York, and you will see, if you look at the numbers in New York, it's surging, starting to surge, at uptick in New York, minimally several hundred cases a day of COVID, and they're now dealing with this subvariant of Omicron. So let's rethink of that. Let's go back and take a look at what will it look like. You know, I'll never treat a buffet or serving line the same again. Dr. Knight taught us how to do that well and what we should be doing and shouldn't be doing. So I think we should review that stuff for people, and then just review some very basic practices that people might want to consider implementing if they plan on participating in large indoor gatherings.
Amen, everybody. And thank you, Carol Soskin, for the reminder. This is Passover season as well. Indeed, this resurrection struggle for Christians is born out of Passover, that Last Supper. Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you. Charge that omission to my head, not to my heart, because we are one. And we have so much to learn from our different faith traditions, because really we are one. We are one. We're all trying to get to God. And those of us who do not adhere to any faith, we're just trying to get to the best life that we can get. So everybody, we're going to be talking with Dr. Max Wolf and Jonathan Jackson, Illinois 1st Congressional District candidate, my brother. And I've reached out to many other candidates. I'm going to reach out to them again, and I'm going to actively pursue getting them on the show. It's so important for you to know who's running to represent you and what it is that they can do. How about that? And whether your candidate wins or not, they will represent you. And you've got to know how to help them help you. I love you, Carol, my sister, who sends me Christmas cards. That's right. I love you, girl. Back in just a minute. Okay, Hannah went to an outside event for the first time yesterday. While she had a mask, I chose not to wear it. You know what? And I went outside yesterday, and I didn't. Well, I was traveling yesterday. I did not wear a mask outside for just about a minute because no one was around. And I took a nice deep breath of air, New York air, but you know what I'm saying. Well, I just, you have to retrain, right? So that was. But thank you so much. You all are the best. I'm sitting up here in New York today thinking about Dr. Deb. I said, oh, she's going to be here in a minute. And my old stomping ground, boy, I can't wait.
I said, never going to New York again. And I missed it, okay? Because I ain't going to lie, on that traffic, it gives me anxiety. And then it gives me anxiety because I be thinking about how much time. Like, I swear we drove up there one time, and I missed my turn. I missed my turn on the block. And it took me literally 20 minutes to go 0.1 miles to get right back to that spot again. So I it's a beautiful place. But I said I wasn't never coming. And then she messed around with the NYU, and I said, I got to come in.
That's right. And get over it. How about that?
Get over it.
Get over it. That's right. Because you're scared about all these people being so close to you. You crazy person. That's it. All these people, all this densely populated city, nasty. It's all right. Girl, I am playing with you, girl. I gotta have some fun with you.
I'm laughing because I was on the subway, right? I was on the subway. This man hands on the phone. He was literally, he took his mask down and started biting his fingernails. Literally let go of the phone and then started biting his fingernails. Mask down, started biting his fingernails. Started drove me crazy.
And then went and kissed somebody. I know it. Oh!
Dr. Wolf is ready.
You know. Wait a minute. I would be upset if you didn't want him to kiss you. Oh, please. Oh, you know, yeah, it's just this. It's social because I was out last night and I had a couple of men who were very, very nice. And, you know, and they literally like walked up in my ear and started whispering. I was like, what? What are you doing? What? This is gross. I mean, I'm flattered, but this is gross. Gross. I love you all. Dr. Max Wolf.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, thank you for being with us today. Thank you. Hold on. Dr. Verholden and Dr. Knighton, you all want to continue to listen?
I will for a few minutes.
Okay. You're going to miss my brother who's running for Congress.
Quiet.
Well, yeah, he's going to be on today. Bless his heart.
That's all.
Bless his heart.
Yeah, I can tell him about the
He called to see if he was still going to be on the show. I said, of course. Of course, they have to have him on the show. But I want all the candidates on the show. And I hope that the questions that I ask and the questions that you ask, call. No, I didn't sing last night. Please, they had Alicia Keys and Barry Manilow and everybody there. But you know what? I am going to resurrect that album that I did with Orrin Hatch, and I'm going to bring it up so that you all can go get it, okay? Joyce? I don't own it. Senator Hatch does, but it was a wonderful album that I did with Chris Willis, who's a brilliant, brilliant musician. And it was a wonderful thing to go into the studio with someone and to have what we call the perfect blend, where your voices really sound as one. He and I had never met each other. And the first notes we sang, it was a perfect blend. Perfect blend. Woof, 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 woof. Wow, how wonderful was that? So, but last night was inspiring. So, okay, I promise you. And Joyce, you're always after me about singing, and so many of you. And I promise you that was one of the things Miss Flack was on me about last night too. So don't worry about that. And even the flight I was supposed to take today, this evening, has already been delayed. Hello? What is that? Dr. Wolf, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
And and Jonathan is looking forward to being with you today.
Poor guy. Just true servant to the people.
You guys, Dr. Knighton and Dr. Verholden, who I've got to connect the two of you. She's going to be the dean of the School of Global Public Health at NYU. She comes in at the beginning of the summer. Yeah. She did the ribbon cutting at their new building. And she's someone. Are you still there, Dr. Deb?
No, she dropped.
Okay. I am going to connect you all. Do you mind if I connect you by text today?
No, go for it.
Okay. Yeah. She's someone you should know each other. You should know one another because you're not only functioning here in New York, but you're functioning in the international space. Matt, thank you for giving me such a great show today here.
No problem. Just doing what I can.
No, just take that, embrace that compliment. That's something I've had a hard time embracing.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've had a hard time embracing that, but don't run away from it. Embrace it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep. Then we've got about 30 seconds.
Okay, stand by.
And 10 seconds.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Thursday, April 7th, 2022. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet me on my official Facebook page, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Santita Jackson and Friends. Everybody, please become my friend there. They're kicking people off of the Santita Jackson page. It's just a landing page. But my official page is Santita Jackson and Friends. That's the only one that counts. And the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe there. And everybody, Joyce, Dave, Arlene, hey, sweetie, and C.E. Green, and Effie, Jewel, everybody, Tosh, please share the show with at least one person today. Share the show with at least one person today as we welcome Dr. Wolf onto the show, talking to us about unemployment and the benefits that we may or may not be getting. What is going on? They have kept so many of us out of poverty, kept us from slipping between the cracks. And of course, we will have Jonathan Jackson, who is a candidate for the 1st Congressional District of Illinois' congressional seat. We cannot wait to hear from him and see what his plans are if he should go to Congress. And of course, I'm inviting all of those who are seeking that seat to the show. And I want to bring everybody on, because you need to know who's running, and you need to know what questions you need to ask of these candidates, because they are going to be working for you. I'm Santita Jackson. Let us get to some of the news today. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 45 degrees, scattered showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 37 degrees, snow showers. The Dow closed down 144 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed down 315 points. And the S&P 500 closed down 43 points. The Celtics, well, they were triumphant over the Bulls, 117-94. The Spurs will be playing the Timberwolves up in Minnesota tonight, and the Blackhawks will be playing as well from the NHL. Well, guess what? The big news of the day is Ketanji Brown Jackson, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. She is poised to be confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court as Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. She would be the first African-American woman, the first Black woman to sit on that high court. 53 senators thus far officially have decided to vote for her, joined by 3 Republicans who broke ranks. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who's facing re-election this year. Senator Susan Collins of Maine, who has had some challenges to her seat over the past few years, and Senator Mitt Romney of Utah, who comes from a progressive Republican family, everybody. His father, Mitt Romney, was known to be a very progressive Republican governor who left the Republican Party in 1964 because the Republicans would not put forth a meaningful civil rights platform, everybody. She could make history today. Indeed, she's already made history, not just by going through this process, but because she, according to polls, is the most populous Supreme Court nominee since they have been taking measurements of such things. Ketanji Brown Jackson, the vote should occur this afternoon. They say maybe 1:45 Eastern Standard Time, but be on the lookout this afternoon, because we could have a Supreme Court justice, the first Black woman in the history of the court, and we are looking for that. And last night I was in New York, everybody, because I went to Clive Davis's birthday party. I was my father's +1. It was fantastic. Got a chance to see Tamron Hall. We were sitting a table away from each other. Clarence Avant and his daughter, Ambassador Nicole Avant. Got a chance to see Isaiah Thomas. That's right, the legendary NBA Hall of Famer, and Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner. And so many people came out last night. David Foster and Barry Manilow and Alicia Keys and Dionne Warwick and Kenny G and so many others came out to celebrate this great man, 90 years young. 90 years young. It was heartwarming to see the tributes from his children, from his grandchildren, to know that he has a great grandchild, to know that he has 2 vacations with his family every year. He said, I lost my parents early and my sister took me in. Family is the most important thing. God bless you, Clive Davis, everybody. Before we go to Dr. Wolf, we've been talking about financial freedom on the Santita Jackson Show, and there is a pathway to it. Even if you don't have good credit, Even if you have no credit and you need to build credit or you need to rebuild your credit, if you have high credit card debt, if you want to purchase a home, if you don't think that purchasing a home is within your reach, well, it is. If you want to refinance your existing home, that is within your reach, even if you've been turned down. If you need to secure a reverse mortgage, a VA loan, whatever your financial issue is, I want you to call Team Hochberg. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com, 56david.com. You can have a free consultation with them. And I would advise you to tell them everything that you are dealing with. Tell them about your $30,000 or $100,000 worth of credit card debt. Tell them about your broken credit. Let them know your situation. And then they will build a program for you that will get you out of the hole, everybody. It will happen, everybody. Think of Miss Sharon, 72, retired, living in a $300,000 home. One would think that she didn't have problems. Well, guess what? She was having challenges paying her bills because her husband's pension and her Social Security pension, it just wasn't enough. Most people are not getting enough. That's why Pastor Darius Brooks is serving people throughout the week at his church. We've been serving people at Rainbow Push because people don't have enough food literally on their tables. Team Hochberg intervened for her. They helped her to refinance and lower her payments over $340 a month. That's more than $4,000 a year. They can do that and more for you. So please call them at 855-56-DAVID. 855-56-DAVID or 56david.com. That's Team Hochberg, everybody. Tell them Santita Jackson sent you. Let's talk with Dr. Max Wolf, brilliant economist. You know, unemployment has been something that is really, you've been very concerned about that for quite some time. You have been really, really keen on looking at that and the benefits that many people have been able to get from unemployment. Why have you focused in this pandemic on unemployment, Dr. Wolf?
So thanks for the inquiry and for having me. As always, look, I think when things are really tough, people have a tendency to either kind of be heroic and pull together or kind of go down the rabbit hole and pull apart and often then kind of end up turning to all kinds of things to feel better that aren't necessarily great, acts of violence against each other, acts of open disregard, alcohol, drugs, etc., all of that. And sometimes retreat into the prison of their own malfunction, which can be various forms of mental illness, which tend to spike in these times, right? And one gauge of how well we're inviting people, at least into the economy, is the unemployment and employment. But I mean that more broadly, right? So most of the numbers that we see, the unemployment number, are kind of a narrow picture, right? It's a keyhole view. So I would look at things like the employment participation ratio, right? So I want to see what percentage of our people, I tend to pay close attention to young people too. So what percentage of people, what percentage of young people out there are finding their way into our economy? Now, obviously finding your way into being a neurosurgeon and finding your way into being working at a drive-through window in the night shift at a convenience store are kind of different places in this economy, but that notwithstanding, are you kind of in the official economy? And there's been an unfortunate slide of a lot of people out of the official statistics. And I think into what gets called as unemployment, and I would just stop here and say a lot of these people are employed, but they may be employed in jobs in the shadow economy or the gray kind of portion of the economy. Which does not mean that they're criminals, although some might be, but they just be doing things, they could be doing things that are not officially counted, taxed, and sort of certified, right? So it's a hard job to make breakfast for all the guys on the construction site in your little tiny kitchen, starting at 4:30 in the morning. It's really hard work, but you probably don't have a permit, and you're not going to be paying sales tax on what you're selling, and you're unemployed, right? So I know people work who are not in the measure. I know there's lots of problems with the measure, but it's what we have, right? It's the cleanest dirty shirt and the intellectual hamper, so it's important. And we've seen this race clearly pushed ideologically to cut benefits, to push people back to work. When we discussed this first about a year and a half ago, it was usually the crowd of people who are busy wheezing on each other, getting COVID and giving it to each other, who are sure that we're done with COVID. right? Which is always a little bit ironic that COVID doesn't seem to be done with them, but they're done with COVID. Unfortunately, I think you're healthier if you don't get done with worrying about the disease until after it's prevalent, but we'll leave that for another conversation. But they've been hurrying up here this idea that if we put people in a horrible situation and we show them that no one cares and they're going to go back to work under threat of death, maybe to offset whatever fears they have of getting sick at work, then our economy will recover. So that was cruel. It didn't make much sense, and we did an experiment on a lot of our people for a year. That experiment has now clearly showed us it didn't work. In other words, those states that raced to force people back to work through cutting eligibility, cutting the total amount of benefits, cutting a period of benefit eligibility, did not see a meaningful increase in return to work as against the states that did not. So in other words, we had a bad idea. It hadn't worked in the past. With great cruelty, we tried it anyway, and then it unambiguously failed. And as you should do when you try something and it fails, we double down and decide to do more of it. And so one of the places you see this most aggressively is in the great state of Kentucky, where the governor, Mr. Bashir, had tried to veto what he called a callous proposal, and it was overridden in cutting the unemployment benefits, right? And here I'd say one thing. Forcing people back out to work is not what makes jobs. Otherwise, developing countries with no social safety net would always have the lowest unemployment rates.
Well,
in fact, they usually have the highest.
hold on one second. I want you to say that one more time, because people, I think we for some reason, I don't know if we really believe that, doctor. Not for some reason. Many people are saying that people are not going back to work because they got too much money during the pandemic.
For sure, there's some of that, right? So there are people who are not going back to work because they have gotten enough benefits, but the benefits are not super generous. And so the issue is, if people will only come and work for you under threat of death, it is possible that you might want to reconsider some of your employment circumstances. Right? I mean, there are a lot of people who are not working because, there are various regulations about how you treat people at work, and with all of those regulations, there may be some cost of employment, right? I understand that, but those are social decisions that are made, right? So, at least for now, I don't know, we're revisiting all of them, but yeah, look, I think there are people who will not be working if you enact any protective measure, right? That's certainly true. However, we've more or less sort of been chipping away at those anyway. And I don't think it works. In other words, what seems to be the case is people just become more and more desperate. And what I'm trying to say is pushing a lot of people back to work doesn't create jobs. Now, we have unfilled jobs. Those might be filled, right? But it doesn't create as many jobs as the people you're likely to push back to work. One. Two, it isn't clear that we gain that much from cutting these subsidies, because what people often tend to do costs us more, right? So when we have an increase in violent crime, and then court costs, incarceration costs, social costs, lost productivity costs, increased security costs to all our businesses, we actually usually end up behind where we started out. So we get to be cooler and poorer, right? So I understand we have this idea in the society that when you're cooler, you get richer. That's mostly just a psychiatric dedication to the marginal productivity of cruelty. It doesn't bear out. In other words, if you expose this to a data study, in most cases it doesn't work. There's a range where it does work, right? If you pay people $1 million a year to stay home, any one job that's paying, less than that's going to have a hard time. But I don't think historically or internationally you can make a very strong case that the somewhat meager benefits we have undermined people's desire to go to work. I think what's done that is that people feel abandoned or betrayed by the social norms and by their employers. And we do need to get those folks back to work. They need to go back to work. We need them back at work. But that might require more than terrorizing them. And it might not make for the best world if we just attempt to terrorize them back into work. It also doesn't seem to work.
Let me bring up Dr. Santita Knighton. She stayed over because she wanted to hear what you have to say. And she, of course, is research clinical scholar. That's right. That's right. But, she is an infection preventionist, of course, someone we need desperately, registered nurse, research clinical scholar at Case Western Reserve University. But she's a citizen, and she wanted to ask you a question or two about this topic. Dr. Knighton?
Yeah, so hi, Dr. Wolf. So one of the things that I'm curious about is how many businesses were started, meaning like is there an inverse relationship between, returning to the labor force and starting a business? So I'm curious to know how those numbers may have shifted. And I'm also curious to know, even though we're seeing, let's say, a decrease in people returning to work, how many of them, in terms of switching careers, are currently in school or in some sort of training program? I don't know, like a part of me just isn't convinced that people just aren't working and just aren't doing anything. But I've seen, firsthand, even within nursing, I know a lot of people that left nursing after the vaccine mandate and have switched over to real estate and really switched over to do other things that they thought about pursuing in life. They started businesses. And so there are a lot that are not necessarily in the nursing workforce anymore, but they're just not out here not doing anything either.
For sure. So those are great questions. I don't know that I can fully answer all of them, but let me give it a little bit of a shot at this. So certainly a fair number of folks who've left the labor force have gone on to do other things. If you do start a business or you go to school more than part-time, you're never counted as unemployed anyway. So our statistics do sort for that, right? So if you enroll in a program, where you take one or two classes a semester, you could still be seen as unemployed. But if you're a full-time or nearly full-time student, you would drop out of those ranks, the unemployment ranks. Likewise, if you start your own business, in fact, in a rather self-serving manner, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which calculates our unemployment statistics, assumes a certain number of people who left the labor force did so to start their own business, even in the absence of immediate confirmationary evidence. In the early portion of COVID, we saw a real decline in the number of people starting businesses, but it rebounded, and now it's pretty high. The only issue is that lots of these sort of sole proprietorship small businesses, and in some cases, these are full-time and meaningful in their ability to provide income to a household, but in many cases, they're kind of odd jobs and gig economy stuff, right? So a lot of the people who get classed of starting their own business in the last year or two are delivering food and groceries and driving Ubers and Lyfts, right? And then I'm certainly not trying to cast aspersion or downplay the importance of those roles. They're very important, but literally essential work. However, we could probably have an interesting argument about whether or not you're exactly an entrepreneur if you're driving for Uber or Lyft or delivering for Instacart or Caviar or Seamless, right? I mean, you might be, but that might be open to a little bit more of a question here. But you're right, people don't do nothing either. Also, just because you don't have a job that's officially recognized and taxed doesn't mean you're doing nothing, right? So the nothing that a lot of these people were doing, because we can see how badly this hit younger people, and particularly women, is taking care of their relatives and taking care of children, because you had a wholesale closure of schools and childcare facilities. And so literally somebody had to be there and do it. And as a parent of a young kid myself, homeschooling means that you're the teacher. Because trying to get a young kid to sit in front of a Zoom for hours, whether that's a good idea or not, separate apart, like that is itself a full-time job, and will leave you wishing you were just at your full-time job at work, which is what you do. So
I've been there.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah. Anyone who's had the first-hand knowledge knows that the idea that that's not a full day is a delusion you can only maintain if you don't have kids, or you made someone else do all the work. I think my point isn't to say people are idle, right? Again, I'm going to say something that people sometimes get alarmed by, but I don't feel my job as an economist is to comment on the moral element. I think that's kind of a dangerous swamp for us to wade into as economists, right? I'm trying to figure out where people are and what seems to have worked historically better and what might be borne out by the data experience as a good suggestion, right? So if something seems cruel and counterproductive and has also failed, we have some value as economists in telling people, hey, that's neither kind nor terribly successful. What else is on the menu, right? In other words, we keep ordering something on the menu that we can't afford that gives us food poisoning. It seems like a good point to come along and say, hey, remember the last 9 times we ordered that? We got by the wheel. The chef was more expensive than we thought. Hey, maybe let's not make it 10.
Right. Now, question, Dr. Wolf. So, in terms of, like, let's say the analogy, so you know how someone, like, let's say, might have a business in name but may have not launched it, and they use, let's say, the opportunities of, like, you know, the government funding programs such as the PPP to kind of get them into that launch. So maybe the data doesn't account for it, like, let's say, being started as a new business.
Okay, we got 1 minute. No, keep on.
We track the EINs. It's pretty imperfect. So if you start a business, one of the first things you do is usually incorporate it and get what's called an EIN, or an employer identification number, from the Internal Revenue Service. So they're tracking, even if the business is big or small, right? But a lot of these businesses, I think, might be kind of what we're historically called side hustle. And usually your side hustle is your only job, only because you lost your other job, right? Or you couldn't go there anymore. So there's definitely a lot of that, and it's interesting. And the entrepreneurship culture in America is very important to the success of the country, and definitely to be lauded and to be nurtured. But I don't think it accounts for the number of people missing. And I can also tell you why. People 16 to 21 and women with children disproportionately left the labor force, and they're also statistically less likely to start businesses than older people and males.
Well, they're calling this the she session. Women were taken back decades. When we look at the advancements that women have made since the 1970s, really, that we went back decades. We went back decades economically, socially, because of this recession. So we've got to continue to have this conversation and look at these cuts to unemployment benefits. Is it going to make our society better? Will it cut poverty? No, it's going to increase it. It's going to make people sicker. Just think about that. I'm going to be continuing this conversation with Dr. Wolf going forward. But coming up, we've got Jonathan Jackson, Illinois congressional candidate. Yep. Yeah, that Jonathan, my brother Jonathan. But he's a candidate for Bobby Rush's seat. We got to hear what he's going to have to say on the Santita Jackson Show. Call me at 773-763-9278. Back in just a minute. All right, everybody. Dr. Wolf, stay right there. Dr. Knighton, we're still on Facebook Live. You want to ask your question?
Oh, no, he answered it. And I mean, I appreciate you for doing so because, you know, of course, this is your expertise, not mine. But of course, you know, it made me fun questions. And so, no, I'm actually pretty good. So thank you.
Yeah. It also could be that one thing that's really interesting is most of us see a kind of little sliver of the world, right? Sometimes called the keyhole view. And what's true in those keyhole views of our group that we hang out with doesn't always generalize, which is the value of the statistic. In other words, if you have a lot of friends who are underpaid, highly educated, and certified mid-career professionals, a lot of them did start businesses, right? If you have a lot of friends who are younger males who didn't finish college and aren't on a definitive career track, a ton of them do start their own businesses. But single parents don't, for a host of reasons, mostly to do with the fact that, you know, being a single parent is kind of a couple of unpaid jobs, usually. And so starting another job without a guaranteed income is a problem. And then the last thing is, since we, even in the pandemic, refuse to work on or fix our health insurance problem, if you are single parent, you got to get that health insurance for you and your kid too, right? And that becomes another issue that I think stops a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs in the U.S., quite frankly.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's something to think about. I mean, because, you know, Dr. Wolf, you made the point that the society that we left in 2020 or late 2019 is not the society we're returning to in 2022 and 2023. It is a different world. It's a different world.
We also millions of our systems with firearms and conspiracy theories instead of medicine and compassion. And that doesn't always end well either.
first of all, there's also so much mistrust. Yes, I'm sorry, Matt.
Yep, I just wanted to let you know that Mrs. Wells left her daughter answered. She left her phone at home, so she does not have her phone right now.
Okay. Can she come on? Or
is on the line. I will put him through.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Jonathan?
Yes, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Excellent. Good morning. How are you, babe?
I love you so much. I've got Dr. Max Wolf here with you.
No. Morning, sir. Yep. Hey, Max, how are you, sir? Okay. I can hear your voice.
Well,
yours.
Dr. Knighton, are you still hanging out so you can listen?
Yeah, I'm just listening in.
Jonathan?
But I'm listening.
I want you to meet Dr. Shanina Knighton. Jonathan, she kind of reminds you of Grandma Gertrude. She is the first person in her family to graduate from high school, but she didn't stop there. She is a nurse who's a PhD, and she's one of about 5,000 or 6,000 infection preventionists in the United States, one of about 16,000 in the entire world. She's a research clinical scholar at Case Western Reserve University, and just absolutely brilliant. And she comes on my show every day, helping us to understand the importance of infection prevention. Yes, sir.
I understand. I've heard her many times. And Dr. Wolf, I love your lineup and love you. I'd like to sit here and listen myself today.
No, honey. You're on the firing line. Come on.
Come on.
10 seconds.
Listening to you today.
That's right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I am Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. I want you to meet me on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. That is my official Facebook page. That is where you can reach me, everybody. Please become my friend over there and like and subscribe on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. And everybody, Jewel and Miss Robinson and Joyce Ann, all these new people who are bumping into. Regina Hill from out in San Francisco. Hey, Dave Dowling up there in Canada, and on and on and on. I'm so glad that you all are part of the Morning Star crew, the Santita Jackson Morning Star crew, as we do every Thursday. We've been talking with Dr. Max Wolf. He's been talking about these unemployment benefits that some governors are ending all around the country. It's not going to put people back to work, he's been letting us know. But as our special guest today, we have Illinois 1st Congressional District candidate Jonathan Jackson. To fully disclose, he is my brother. I love him. I'm supporting him. That having been said, I've reached out to the candidates that I have known of at the time, and I will continue to reach out to get them all on the show, because I think that as a steward of the airwaves, it's important for me to present them to you, to let them have a platform so they can speak to you, even if you're not a resident of Illinois. And so many of you who tune into the show are not. I hope that you will take this as a template so that you will know what to ask of your candidates as they are running. We are in the throes of the 2022 election season. Remember, all 435 U.S. House of Representatives seats are up for re-election. 35 of the 100 seats in the U.S. Senate, they're up for re-election. So it's election season. You have an opportunity to change the game, indeed, to change the world. Welcome to the show, Jonathan Jackson. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Santita. It's great to be on your show. Thanks. Thank you, dear guest. Loved your previous segment. And let me disclose, I love my sister. So, thank you.
I love you too, with all my heart. That's my brother. I love you. That having been said, let me just ask you this. Why are you running for the U.S. House of Representatives? What would you expect to bring? How did you end up here?
I'm running because the first congressional district is in pain. There's too many people are not making enough money. We have 50% of the people in Illinois now making less than roughly $20 an hour. Our economy is going through a major transformation. So old industries will be going away. We have to have our eyes focused and our mindset on the future of work. What was a short run or a test run in what telecommuting was going to mean, and distant learning and being away from the office space is now setting in place for the long run. And we have to have a vision for what this means. Where are we positioning ourselves for cybersecurity? Where are we positioning ourselves for the transformation of energy? Where are we positioning our region and our state for the transformation of this intermodal infrastructure opportunity we have to connect our rail and waterways and airways in this region, in this heartland of the nation? So I want to bring a vision to help bring those resources from Washington, D.C. back to our area. We've had 250,000 African Americans to be removed, to leave from this region. And now we are suffering as a consequence. We're having a depleted city. We peaked in our population of 3.6 million. Now we're roughly at 2.6 million. And we can turn this around. We have to stop the gun violence. We have to strengthen our education. The conversation we all just had. People need an out. People need an alternative. People need an off-ramp to get back to their life. This sort of job displacement, it's not the people's fault. The economy is changing, but we have to inform them, and we have to talk to our policy leaders to bring resources back so people can transform their lives. I believe fundamentally government steps in and helps people when they can't help themselves. People don't know what the future of work looks like. This younger generation has been badgered and battered by these economic waves of the internet bust in 2000 and the housing bust in 2008 and COVID shut down the economy. They need assistance. An entire generation is being left out and left behind. That's why I'm running. I got here because I know I'm the most qualified. I know I can make a difference. I can hit the ground running. I've had a working relationship with many people in the Senate and in the Congress, and I want to bring that to bear and bring those resources back home.
We're talking with Jonathan Jackson, running for the 1st congressional seat, currently occupied by Congressman Bobby Rush, indeed, who just got the anti-lynching bill passed. He's been lobbying for that for many, many years. Jonathan, you've had as a particular concern our children and their education and just what happened to them during the pandemic. Could you elaborate on that?
You're going to see when COVID recedes, and COVID is still hearing about outbreaks every day. COVID has been taken off the television, but it's not taken out of the classroom. I can name 4 schools that have had outbreaks of 5 teachers and students or more that have had to be removed in the last week starting this past Monday. What you're going to find out is the children that should have started kindergarten 3 years ago are going to go into the classroom in almost 2nd and 3rd grade and are going to miss their benchmarks for reading in 3rd grade. Benchmarks of 3, 5, and 8th grade are going to be totally skewed. We haven't even collected the data back, but you can anticipate what it's going to share with you. The 4th grader is now going into 7th. The 7th grader had a Zoom graduation, is going to be a freshman in school and didn't have the benefit of a counselor. The junior in high school wasn't able to fill out his paperwork, had a Zoom graduation, didn't fill out his paperwork for trade school or for college, might not have had access to a counselor. Now he's aged out of the system. We're going to have to backfill this. The 16-year-old was not able to have driver's ed. And so you've got a generation of children that are now 18 that can't drive that are still stuck at home. So we have to look at the whole unintended consequences of COVID and come back and offer families and children relief so they can get on with their life.
Let me go.
These are the things that I see coming.
But I mean, can one congressman?
There's the thing called summer learning loss, where when the children take off for 3 months in the summer, didn't have activities, and to have to restart, refresh, to get back to school in the fall. We're going to have a COVID learning loss syndrome of the students that have been out for 2 years. But we don't know where they are on grade and where these numbers are. And I know they said they were doing remote and distance. We've got to test that because I think those numbers are going to be extremely far off.
If you got to Congress, would you want hearings? What would you want to do? Would you want to meet with the Secretary of Education? I mean, how would that work as a congressman?
I think this is a problem we have to start with top down. Have to make sure their parents are getting employed to get all the resources they need so they can get the resources to their children. I want to probably first start with the Commerce Secretary and look at workforce issues. We got to get the parents made whole so they can help their own family. I think that's the preferred method that I have. Some problems are bottom up, other problems are top down. I think empowering the families, the mothers, the fathers, stabilizing the household, they can best help their children. So I probably want to start with the workforce and somewhere on the human services. I'm partial to working in financial services because when we can take the discrimination out of those financial services institutions, we stop robbing the families of the resources they need.
I think Dr. Wolf wants to jump in here. Dr. Wolf?
Yeah, I wondered if you think first that you might be going into a Republican Congress, and if you do, how does it change your plan if the Republicans took out?
You know, I'm not really that much concerned about that at this time. I see what some of the polls are. I was in Washington, D.C. on Monday, and I was in the hearing room with Senator Durbin to advance Ms. Ketanji Brown Jackson out of the Senate, and I saw the meanness in Ted Cruz and Senator Cotton and Senator Hawley. I want to be prepared to be on the field to stand up and challenge those men and their vitriol. I know I'm not in the Senate, but in the Congress, but anywhere I can have influence. The other part is I think we just have to, our numbers are winning. That they are playing in this game now, going for the tabulation, the counting of the votes. We have to come out in overwhelming numbers to keep the House. Think about this. In 2016, President Trump won by roughly 75,000 in the 4 states. And in 2020, they said he lost by 400,000 in roughly 6 states. And there are 5.2 million persons that have felonies that are permanently disenfranchised. We've got more people disenfranchised that would vote Democrat. I think we have to push back up to the top of our agenda these voting rights acts and to stop all of these shenanigans on restricting voting so we can overwhelm the polls and keep the House and Senate and the President Democrat. So I don't know why we put on the brake when it comes to voting rights, because voting rights protection and voting turnout helps the Democrats. I'd like to see that as a higher priority.
Let me go to Renee. Renee from Chicago. How you doing, Renee?
Good morning. I'm doing well, and thanks for taking my call. You know, I just want to say that I've been following Jonathan's career for years now. I've seen him on Push. I used to listen to him faithfully on Cliff Kelly's show every week when he would come on as a guest. And what I've seen is that he's a man who has courage to stand up for what I think is right, or what is right, even if it goes against the grain. And, you know, I saw him introduce Bernie Sanders in 2016 when I stood in line with my children for hours to get to see who should have become the president. I know that if he goes to Congress, he's going to stand up for the people and try to do what's right to help those who are typically overlooked, the people who need help. I've heard him talk about helping homeless people himself on the street, taking them into McDonald's or wherever and giving them a meal. I've heard him talk about treating people with dignity, something that I don't think our government has been doing for the majority of the citizens, because if they treated us with dignity, we would have health care for everyone. He's somebody that I support. I'm just a little bit upset that he's running for Congress instead of running for mayor of Chicago, because that was my hope. That was my dream, that he would go to the 5th floor of Chicago. But since he's running for Congress, even though I don't live in the 1st congressional district, I will support in any way that I can to help him get that seat because, I mean, what goes on in Congress, it doesn't matter if he's my congressman because what they do in Congress affects everybody's lives, no matter where they live. So you have my support. That might not be good because usually the people I support don't win, but I'm going to knock on wood that this time things will work out the right way. And thank you for running and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you very much. Jonathan?
Thank you so much.
Oh, so Jonathan, what does a congressman do? Help us with that. Let's start there, baby.
I would say that the congressman, of course, the federal representative, in more layman's speech, you're a shareholder in a U.S. corporation. You are in the room, you get to see the decisions that are being made, you get to advocate, you get to help people solve their problems, to go through the administrative process, to go through the bureaucracy, you get to help people from their visas and their immigration issues. You get to help business persons deal with their contracts that may have some issues so that you can make sure that the process of government is flowing. You're in a position to inform people, influence. That's why I think it's so important that we are in the room. If you look at it the other way, since 1789, there have been 10,427 members in the House of Representatives. 162 have been African American. We've been in the room less than 1% of the time for the lawmaking as lawmakers, and 156 of those representatives as African Americans have the vote. 6 have been delegates, so they observe but do not vote. And so although it's late in the day in the country, it's very early for us to be in the room to help shape policy on these laws. And there are people that are going to come from districts that have no idea what we're talking about in the city of Chicago, on the south side, in the Southland, whose neighborhoods and places where the economy has been great, where the discrimination in financial services have been low because of the ethnic makeup of their districts. They don't understand how redlining and the history is a legacy issue that we have to fix in the city and to strip people of their wealth and land. They don't understand how predatory lending hit the south suburbs. They don't understand how mass transit lines were cut off and excluded from regions where people can move around with greater mobility. They just don't understand that. And so you have to also come in and educate your colleagues. And economics don't flow from just the district, they flow from the region. So I got to talk with the representatives in Indiana that may be Republican and the people in adjoining districts, maybe Democrat or Republican, and say, for our region, although this plant won't be in my district, it's in our region, and we have to come together. That's something I bring to the table, knowing that this isn't very parochial and provincial in my district. No, this is ours. If it's good for our region, people in this district will drive and work in all these other areas, and it benefits us all. So I'm pleased that I've had a business background and business training, and I've been in business, and I've filled out these minority paperwork and all that other kind of stuff. And I want to challenge that to clear that up so we can stop putting African American businesses on the sideline with all this onerous paperwork to show that we're black, we're colored, we're Negro. It's humiliating going through all this paperwork. We can put more people in the business once we clear some of those bottlenecks up. I tell people, if you don't see African Americans, women and blacks and Hispanics in the business, that doesn't mean we can't do it. Don't look at the finish line, look at the starting line, and look at what held us up getting into the business.
Would you, Chris Keys, hey, Chris from South Africa. He says, will you support the Native American community as they seek justice from the Catholic Church for the horrors they experienced in the Catholic schooling system? And indeed, we're investigating the same horrors in the United States. We are now investigating the horrors that were visited upon Indigenous children in Canada. We're investigating that as well because many thousands of our Indigenous children were disappeared here as they were trying to, as our government was trying to so-called mainstream them and Europeanize them. We support Will you support the indigenous people's struggle for recognition and restoration? Indeed, President Biden wants to tie black reparations to indigenous reparations. He said, I won't discuss black reparations without discussing indigenous. Your thoughts?
Well, of course, it's our family's ancestry. We have Native American blood in us as well, African American blood as well. Our grandparents come by way of Greenville, South Carolina, and Cripple Creek, and the Cherokee lineage, and mother and her lineage comes out of Florida, and the Seminole. So there's a lot of ancestry and African American bloodline that the African American community doesn't know yet, hasn't been recognized, that we have to inform them about. But absolutely, I don't know the specifics of the details you're talking about, things I have to learn about, but absolutely, we have to do some repair. It's amazing as we talk about the Ukraine, digressing one moment, you can put into perspective 1,000 years, 500 years, 1,500 years of history. And so the Voting Rights Act and Martin Luther King's death, this is 54 years after Martin Luther King's death. It's not been that long ago. And Americans, I think we have to now take a longer-term view on how we've made yesterday's solutions or today's problems. And you have to have a sense of history. Now, history is coming into play in the Ukraine, and you cannot ignore it. You can't sidestep it. Our history here in America, we have to put it back into perspective. Why are there 5.2 million Americans feeling disenfranchised? These come out of slave laws that we still live with the legacy. We have a lot of things we have to correct to make our country even better.
Look, does your business background really make you agnostic about with whom you work? That is to say, it's not that you don't want people to be moral, but just you see a pathway to working with Republicans. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it starts with integrity first. We have to make sure we are honoring all persons. The economics, you say it's economics, it's economics. No, it's fundamentally treating people right. Then the economics flow right. But if you are trying to exploit people, the economics never seem to quite add up. Being in business, and it's so natural. It's almost like in politics, President Email Jones always said here in Chicago that if you're not sitting at the table, you're on the menu. Well, because every vote counts, and some politicians counting you up. Same thing in economics. Everyone has to participate in the economy, and we have different needs and different services, different occupations, but people have to have fair scales. Can't overcharge people for money for their house. Can't overcharge people for their insurance on their car. You can't overcharge people for their hospitalization or health care. And likewise, you can't commit the acts of violence by keeping certain trades and skills out of schools and not making sure that broadband and internet is accessible and affordable in other areas. So when the economics are non-prejudicial, things flow. When things are prejudicial, this is where you start getting bubbles, a little vapor of a film over some gaseous air, and this is when they pop. If the economy is strong and things are fair, people are normal and they do what's natural. When it's not, this is when you start having these ups and downs because some people pay too much for the mortgage for too little capital. Some people will get a free ride, and that's not fair.
I've got a couple minutes left before we go. Make your case for why you are the person who should be elected congressman from the 1st Congressional District of Illinois.
Born and raised here, went to Whitney Young High School, went to Northwestern University for business school. I've taught at the community college, Kennedy King. I've taught at Chicago State. I understand the city, I understand the region, I understand the state, and I understand a great part of the world. I've worked with these elected officials, been invited. I've got several endorsements from the congressional leaders that you will hear about. I work with the person in the district, in the community. This district is 60 miles long from south of Roosevelt Road to Wilmington. It's 54% African American, roughly 38% white, and 8% Hispanic. I work with the Hispanic community. I've got many of my white friends and colleagues I've worked billion spend, a once in a generation, a lifetime spend is coming out of the federal government. I don't want to see it pass us by. I'm really excited about what Bill Ford, the Ford Motor Company, is doing in Tennessee. They're looking at the future of the electric vehicle. They're looking at the demise or really the going away of the combustible engine. They've invested $11 billion in Tennessee. This is awesome. The Ford Motor Company has taken the United Auto Workers with them to Tennessee. They left Tennessee in 1952, the Ford Motor Company. They are returning to Tennessee 17 years later with the United Auto Workers. They're bringing unionization to the South. I want to make sure our region is hospitable. We've got a Ford Motor plant out here in Ford Heights. I want to make sure we can do all that we can to bring high-paying jobs back to our region. If they can take it to Tennessee, where they left 70 years ago, how much more can they do in our region where we're already tooled and up and running? So I can see the future of cybersecurity. Congressman Rush was on the telecommunications commissions, and that has to deal with all of this telecommunications and all of the cyber. With 2 million jobs short of people that can do cybersecurity and other good things. After this COVID, this theory of global supply chains is going to be challenged. They're going to start what was outsourcing, taking jobs out of the United States. They're going to start insourcing. Many U.S. corporations realized they were too dependent upon foreign labor outside the country. So I can look at us going into an era of a renaissance, and I want us to make sure that we're positioned for that growth in the future.
Jonathan Jackson, candidate for the 1st Congressional District of Illinois, United States House of Representatives. Everybody get registered to vote. Get registered to vote. That is your obligation. And ask questions of these candidates. Ask them about their plan, what they plan to do in Washington. Ask them how they plan to work across the aisle. It is predicted that we might have a bloodbath, but we might not. But whatever it is, the people across the aisle, wherever you sit, really do matter. I'm so glad that you have a plan to work with everybody, Jonathan Jackson. And for the record, I love you. God bless you. Thank you, Dr. Wolf, for staying with us today. Hey, just so that you know, at Clive Davis's party last night, a lot of good people had a lot of good things to say about you last night. So that was a wonderful thing. Everybody, I love you. It's a joy to be with you every day. It's a privilege. I thank you for joining me. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page and on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Going to get a couple more questions in from Dr. Max Wolf and Jonathan Jackson. I love you, everybody. Matt, thank you for a great show. God bless and have a great day.
Change the world, we can do it.
Jonathan, is there anything further that you would like to say? Well, let me start with you, Dr. Wolf. Is there anything else you would like to ask about aside from this crazy question that you're not going to talk about that you just sent to me? Is there anything else you'd like to ask of Jonathan? We're on Facebook, Dr. Wolf.
Yes. I always ask the following question. I'm not sure it's good, but I always find it interesting. So, what if you could have one issue, one legacy, when you're sort of thinking of exiting Congress? What is the thing most important for you to achieve and be remembered for once you get there?
Dr. Wolf, in fairness, I'll have to think on that. Right now, I'm in a day-to-day grind. I'm thinking there's 68 days to early voting. There are 82 days to the election. I'm just trying to get across the finish line and get a campaign stop opening. I'll have to assess what the opportunities are and what the field is. I haven't thought of beyond the first hurdle, and that's getting in there and keeping up with which way the economy is going and the nation's going. This issue in the Ukraine is a game changer. So I also know that in economics, things change. And so I wouldn't impose my belief or thoughts on the future. When I get there, I'll have a better idea of some of the things that I'm saying that I'd like to be able to do and some harsh realities that I will confront once I get there. And then I can make that assessment in fairness.
What do you say to Mark Upton? Oh, I'm sorry. Go on, Max.
No, I just mean really broadly, like, will you be, assuming you'll focus on healthcare, public safety, job, climate administration, that kind of thing. Things have become committee assignment choices, which guide where your time and focus is.
I really care about the financial services from so many perspectives because if you stop robbing people, stop with the excessive overdraft fees, make the financial services more available where people have access to capital where they can live their life. I understand that. I also understand that you have to meet people where their needs are. I was very excited to hear about the President Biden's human infrastructure bill. And that's something that touches my heart deeply. We're going to have to rebuild families. I don't think that's a sensitivity that I would have. That's a sensitivity I do have and I care a lot about. I see families, when I look at teen suicide, I look at the trauma that's been inflicted by gun violence. I would like to make a major step forward on reducing this gun violence. This to me is insanity. If there's something short-term I can do really, really big is confront this gun violence. I feel like a prisoner in my neighborhood. I see senior citizens getting more bars and locks, and that's something very immediate. When I filed my papers to run for Congress on March 7th at the gas station of my choice, 3 blocks from my house, a security guard lady was killed, being carjacked with 2 children in the car. 2 days later, a friend of mine was shot up on March 9th. We're feeling the effects of trauma and guns. We've got a business owner, a friend of mine, who's going to have his nightclub closed for the summer because he anticipates there'll be so much violence. So that's a game changer in this area. And it's happening nationwide, and why people are reaching for guns is insanity. I don't want to see more people with guns. I don't want to see people having more guns in the police department. We need to de-escalate. And Dr. Wolf, if I can bring about any sense of peace, reduction of war, our nation's been at war the entire time my youngest child has been alive. He's now 20 years of age. Our nation has been at war every day of his life. I think that's sad and wrong, and I want to change that.
Jonathan, what do you say to Mark Upton? Because people have a lot of opinions here. He says, you sound like a typical Chicago Democrat. A lot of talk and no real solutions to the black problem. Why don't you speak to him?
Yeah, I have nothing to say.
The black problem? Oh, boy. Black people have problems. We're not the problem. Hey.
That's a pre-packaged statement that he's made. And, he's trying to be inflammatory. If he has a solution he'd like for me to address or talk about, I'd be more than honored.
Absolutely. What about, what are we going to do about the schools? I mean, does a congressperson have an impact on this school discussion? I mean, because our children are behind, and a lot of our children, well, there is no plan to help them to get caught up and to move forward.
Well, this problem doesn't affect the entire nation. It doesn't affect every district. You've got to get there and share your story and build relations with persons in the Congress and ask them to come to your district, and you go to theirs and you learn about them. You share with them about yours. They just don't know.
So you'd want to travel and see different districts and invite people to yours.
You have to, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Some people you'll find out aren't so much against you, they just never knew about you. Didn't care because they didn't know. And it's a learning curve that all congressional people have to go through on the size and stuff. It's a very complex nation. Some people, if you look at how wealth is going, have gotten a lot wealthier and things are better than ever. Some people have gotten much poorer. And look at how the expressways are set up. People get in, get on their phones, have their playlist, their music, they're tuned out to a lot of things. Every tell I see these hurricanes that are becoming more commonplace now. And I think about the ones that came through Kentucky and Southern Illinois last year. And those people in the warehouse, they had like less than 30 minutes notice. And some of the alarms were going off 5 minutes before the tornado came through. And I can't help but think about some of those people woke up that morning, exercised, lived their life, put their iPods on, went to the warehouse, never looked at the news, the weather, and didn't know what could happen weather-wise, and that tornado came through there and killed 100 people.
Mm.
And could it have been preventable? Probably, if they had better shelter and some sort of forecast and understanding what the weather can be. And I would use that analogy to say things can turn just that fast, that we got to stay in tune. We're looking at parts of this country that are going into droughts right now. We're going to have greater food issues, and we have to anticipate these problems because we can see they're here now. Droughts are happening in Texas, and violent storms are happening in the southeast. I probably had 3 plane cancellations in the last 2 months because of bad weather.
Yeah.
That's pretty high for my way to travel.
Well, before you go, let me ask you this. Throughout our lives, one of the things that we have seen, Dr. Wolf, with our parents' work is not just working across the aisle, but, for example, more than 20 years ago, Reverend Jackson had a march through Appalachia. And a person who walked with him on a leg of that march was Jerry Falwell, the head of and founder of the Moral Majority. Even though they had political differences, they were personal friends he was personally supportive to our family in times of challenge, and we love the Falwell family. We have seen throughout our lives sometimes people who would surprise us, Jonathan, who Reverend actually had good, solid relationships with, even as they maintained their differences. Speak to that. I mean, is that a part of your own operating philosophy?
Absolutely. I remember being in Africa with some of those same ministers. When we went through Appalachia with Willie Nelson. Of course, it's the American tapestry. It's our culture, and it's quite beautiful to all the variety and lives and ethnicity in this country. And I think people inherently are good. I think, of course, some people are bad. And I think it's an opportunity we have to educate, inform. Reverend Martin Luther King, bless his memory, during this week of his assassination, 54 years later, he empowered us and gave us the tools to show you that by the way you achieve your goals is the way you'll have to govern and live with them. So going forward, the spirit of love and transformation, education, and healing is something that we're charged to do. And you have to be on the offensive. You have to be a peacemaker, not a peacekeeper, a peacemaker. You have to be willing to have courage and sacrifice. And as our fathers always told us, that you have to have a clean heart and be willing to have dirty hands. That this isn't pretty, but it's necessary. And you're going to be criticized, but a leader is willing to take that criticism. And that a leader is not simply following opinion polls, but you have to mold opinions. You have to share with people things they don't know and help transform the life that they see.
Ketanji Brown Jackson this afternoon is poised to become the first Black woman to be confirmed for the Supreme Court. Your thoughts before we go?
It's just amazing. What's taking so long to even have an African American woman considered to be a Supreme Court justice? I think she will offer so much by her depth of experience, by having been a former defense attorney, that we all need a defense attorney for so many things. That she didn't build her career taking people down. She built her career holding people up and giving them the congressional people that have, all these senators that have voted for her and had great things to say about her, but then they said I couldn't vote to advance her. That meanness we have to confront and challenge. But it's a beautiful day in America, and I want to say thank God that we're here to see this from Phyllis Wheatley, the first African American to be manumitted from slavery, young African American child, all the way to 2022 with Chairwoman Maxine Waters, Chair of the Financial Services Committee. She has something to say to all of the bankers and non-bank institutions in the nation. That's awesome to see. Ketanji Brown Jackson to be heading towards the Supreme Court, an African American woman. That's incredible. And to see Miss Bowman, an African American woman that is now the chairwoman of the New York Stock Exchange, that there have been tremendous strides and breakthroughs. And now we begin to expand those into health facilities and technology companies and financial institutions and transform education as we know it.
Jonathan Jackson, it's been a privilege to be with you this morning. Dr. Wolf, is there anything that has been left unsaid for you?
Well, always many things left unsaid, but that's the point of tomorrow, of the days to come. So look forward to hearing about and charting your successes ahead, John.
Jonathan Jackson, so proud of you. So proud of you.
I always you and Santita. Keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. Your support has meant the world to me just down through the years. When you look at our family pictures, he's always stood right behind me when we would line up, as we have lined up, with his hand on my shoulder, and I feel it every day. I love you so much, Jonathan. My brother, who was always reluctant to speak because you stuttered and stammered, and look at how God held your tongue and then released it right on time so that you could speak for the people. I love you, Johnny. Love you. God bless you, everybody. Thank you. And I love you, Dr. Wolf. You are our friend. You are my friend. And I thank God that you're in my life. Thank you so much. And thank you, Matt. Thank you. I thank God for you. Sending you much love, my dear friend. Everybody, all my morning stars, I love you, love you, love you, love you, love you. Blessings to you, Jewel, and D-Ray, and Jerry. Yeah, it does mean a whole lot to have someone running with global experience, because it is the world. And these 535 seats in both houses of Congress mean so much to people all around the world. Our representatives in the House of Representatives can get into virtually any country on earth. And those are state visits because of the respect that our Congress, both houses, command. Absolutely. That's why we have to protect this republic. That's why we have to fight to expand this democracy. That's why we have to fight for our voting rights. That's why we have to fight to make America be America for everyone. I love you, everybody. Thank you, L. Stanley Davis, always here with us every day. Joyce, Robert Williams, Dave Dowling, D. Ray, sending you all much love today. Mark, thank you for weighing in. Agree or disagree, I'm glad you were part of the conversation today, Mark Upton. And sending you all much love today. I got to run because I got some things to do here in New York today. I love you, love you, love you. Have a great one, everybody. God bless you. Thank you, Matt, for a great show.